hydrogen power units. You know, we can sell them, but actually I'd say more than 95% of our business is leasing. So we provide effectively energy as a service using our hydrogen power units. And also early on, the words vertical integration were used. That's something that is, you know, really key to our business. It's not something we ever planned to do, but we found that in order to grow our business and get our units out there, we had to look at the full value chain of what we were doing. So kind of without meaning to, we are currently the largest green hydrogen producer in the UK, which is pitiful given the size of what we're doing. I know that we won't be for very long, but we needed the molecules, so we had to do our own production. We also have our own fleet of MEG-Cs, of tube trailers to move the gas around, to take it to our HPUs, and we've sort of ended up controlling all of that in order to provide a reliable, responsive service to our customers. And I think that's really set us apart. And I guess standardization as well. You know, we have a very small range of products. They're not huge. They're not really bespoke in any way. There's customizing that can be done, but it's pretty much standard products to keep things simple on our side as well.
Thanks, Charlie. Again, I'll just let any DBT colleagues jump in if there's any immediate questions, but if not,
no, just frantically taking notes because this is all really very interesting. Thank you so much.
Great. Kim, I think you're next. Thanks, Kim.
So I want to take a bit of a step back and up from this question and come to what have we seen in other parallels that we mentioned in the introduction, other parallel industries where we've seen disruptive business models work, and how have they worked, and how do you normally, because the hydrogen economy is bringing new technologies to market and scaling up a whole new economy that doesn't exist today in a different way. The grey hydrogen economy does, as our colleagues in Earth Products I'm sure will say, but it's a very different economy than the energy industry that this hydrogen economy is coming into. What you will normally see and what succeeds in technology integration is scaling up, is taking the right steps at the right time and getting over the technology valley of death. And that scale up from technologies that work at TRL 7 up to where you have got proper industrial liquid markets, internationally trading scales of molecules moving. Where I think we are currently as an industry missing a trick is that at a global level, everyone's looked at hydrogen and went, I need to go big or go home. I need to go, I need to go big ammonia. It's going to be traded internationally. We're going to be looking at imports, etc. And that's meant we've gone big risk with a brand new technology. And the steps up that staircase, we've been talking about small nation first mover advantage since COP26 in Glasgow, and I don't think the UK has captured it. And I think that's where we've got to look at the disruptive business models and how the DBT and UK government focus on capturing, we're a knowledge capital economy, and how do we capture the knowledge capital in this rather than the molecule cost? Because our power price structure means our molecule cost is never going to be the most competitive globally. It is, unless we change that, which maybe we could. It's the knowledge capital, it's the innovators that are sitting around this table, it's the SMEs. And often when we're looking at our hydrogen strategy and our energy strategy from DESNZ, we look very top down. And I think we are doing that still. We're looking at, right, we're focusing it on steel, we're focusing it on the right things, you know, cement, glass, but that's less than half of the UK GDP. The other half of it is in SMEs and smaller, medium businesses that need to scale up. And a lot of the hydrogen economies in that side of it, a lot of the innovators, a lot of the disruptive business models is in that SME forgotten half of where the investment needs to go and the focus needs to go, because that's where we'll capture the IP development and the knowledge capital that we can then create growth and leverage from going forward. So I think that's where the government needs to focus in on. And I think looking at where we have high-end value margin products and value chains that have price elasticity within them, luxury products, etc., where they can take the cost of first mover learning, where they can take the cost of early stage before you scale up. If we just focus on the big ones of industry, we're missing that as well. And we do have some of that in the UK. We've got quite a bit of that. And I think we should be more thinking about how we focus on helping the smaller scale up steps, taking the right crawl before you can walk, before you can run steps, before pushing too big, because it doesn't all just come in economies of scale. A lot of the value should be captured in those business models by designing them where you're targeting our strength in engineering and skill sets, our strength in size, where we've got high value products.
That is really interesting. Can I just ask? So I think we were quite aware that across the UK generally, we're very good at the innovation end of things and the inventing new things and the coming up with kind of really good research. We're not so good at the commercialization end. How would you say that hydrogen's doing in terms of that journey? Is it possible to commercialize well in the UK, or is that something where there's not the right support?
It's something where there is not the right price structure in our power markets, because our spark price is so linked to natural gas that every electron you make, you're structurally making more expensive than the fossil alternative. So when you go and then make that into another molecule again, you're making it even more expensive. So unless the government, and this isn't a DBT problem, this is a DESNES problem, do something about our strike price difference compared to the rest of Europe, then we are hampering our ability to unleash our potential in the hydrogen economy in terms of export of our raw feedstock, which is wind and rain, which we are the Saudi Arabia of in the UK, luckily. So I think there's something there. What we do have, and I think you're hearing from a lot of those around this table, not me, are the engineering, the innovation, those small scale up. You're right, the UK's always been remiss in how we scale those up and how we produce that up. And I think it's because we're starting too top down in the policy. We're looking at the big boys and we're forgetting the 50% of the economy that are the people with their hands up around this table. So I'll stop talking there.
That was really helpful. Thank you. We're probably skipping a bit too much into kind of the barriers stage. So if we just stick for the moment with the other areas, I'd love to hear some more voices, but that was really helpful. Thank you, Kim.
Great. I think Chloe, you've got your hand up next, so you can come in.
Good, and it's good timing actually to go after yourself, Kim, because you highlighted a lot of those points where I can come in from the opposite point of view to what some of the initial members were saying. So traditionally, the hydrogen production method was an on-site generator of a steam methane reformer on customer sites, and that would be kind of small, sized appropriately for one off-taker and used. Over the years, our company have gone through kind of upscaling this for various different industries. We jumped into kind of refinery supply and then electronic supplies and then into the mobility space. So it's kind of always adapting the technology in a new way to a new market. And we do need both. We need the small scale generators, this time not steam methane reformers, but electrolyzers and all the novel technology from aluminium and all the rest of it. We need those to start small, supply one off taker and grow. But we also, as a company, we've taken the view from having that experience of what makes things most efficient, most economic, most optimized, is go for that disruptive, very large scale, build it and the market will come, because you take out one barrier of having the supply. And so for anybody who isn't aware, we've built the Neon Green Hydrogen Company project, which will be 600 tons a day of hydrogen, and that was based on looking at some of the problems that Kim was mentioning about, say, the UK market being so expensive to produce in. This was looking at, okay, well, what can make things most accessible, most convenient, most easy to actually access the green power that we actually need, and therefore make the molecules as cheap as possible and as efficiently generated as possible, to then be able to supply at this top end. So you can have the small scale that operates like we do with our steam methane reformers, our nitrogen generators, everything that can be supplying. But when they go down for maintenance, when we need that bit of extra peak and trough, when we need more people to come on, we've got this larger kind of supply option that can come in to supply the at scale piece, and that would be through ammonia dissociation. So that's kind of a novel production pathway for a company like ours. It's kind of a disruptive pathway compared to our traditional steam methane reformer plants, and we've always done electrolyzers as well. So it's kind of a new technology that's going to be able to drop the cost and drop the price of getting electricity in, but also enable hydrogen to be deployed in different locations where you don't necessarily have the electricity available, because obviously it's not just the cost, it's the actual getting the molecules to some of these pieces of equipment. So it's then enabling, we need to be able to choose which technology is right for the different applications. And again, like Kim was saying, some of the large scale high-end users, the refineries, the glass, the ceramics, all of them might need something super large, but we might also want to be able to distribute to different people across the UK. And some of that comes in with saying liquid hydrogen is also kind of a disruptive molecule as such. It's meaning that markets that traditionally would be too large for gaseous supply, you can't have tube trailers going every 5 minutes to site, but not close to a site to be able to have a pipeline or an on-site because they don't have space, the power, the water, the whatever. The liquid hydrogen market is going to be something that disrupts the market as a whole because it enables that middle piece. And we can see that with our first refueling station at Crawley, for example, with Metrobus. They were kind of stuck in between that size category of what can we do? We're going to be too big for this. We don't have it on site. So it's kind of enabling, again, optimized solutions, efficiency of solutions to get molecule out there, which then breeds confidence, which then breeds everything else can come with it. I'll stop there for now.
Great, thanks, Chloe, for that kind of broad overview. I don't know whether this is the end of the time for the session one. I know that we started 5 minutes late, so I'll look to Zoe and honestly, whether you think we should move on. I know there's a couple of hands up. There's 2 more hands up from HEA members, so if you're happy for those 2 to go before we move on. Okay, great. Yes, please. Dan, if you'd like to come in and share your perspective.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I'll try and be quick. I think, yeah, I definitely echo what Kim and Chloe and Charlie to some degree came up with the business model. I'm an SME. I could go on about the barriers, but we got a disruptive technology here with ammonia as hydrogen. So we supply our technology into hydrogen generator sets. We also supply into ammonia generator sets. Ammonia opens up a huge opportunity to transport hydrogen and energy around. We're also looking to disrupt the energy balancing sector, which typically works off gas gen sets, to trying to break free from gas by using ammonia, using green ammonia, whether it comes from import, whether it's produced domestically. That we become an off-taker. So we are one of the few people, I guess, here that are an SME, but also show the potential of using that technology in remote areas, grid-constrained areas. And yeah, well, I'll park that there. But I think for where we are at the moment, ammonia as an energy carrier for hydrogen is definitely a huge disruptor that we see huge potential for. And then I'll stop there and I'll wait for the barrier discussion.
Great. Thanks, Dan, for being so succinct. Simon, I think you're the last one to come in on this first session point.
Yeah, so apologies. I think mine was following on from Kim's commentary, really. And it's probably more for the barriers section. So if you wanted to move on, that's fine. But it was just my observations of the customers we see here. But it tends to be the major OEMs have the time to actually develop the product. And I think we've seen so many startups actually fail at this level of actually getting the actual product off the ground, and it's a real challenge for them.
Thanks, Simon. Well, I'm very happy to move on to barriers. So if you want to say a bit more about that, you're very welcome to, because I think that sounds like it's maybe an access to finance sort of barrier.
Yeah, it tends to be. I mean, certainly the major OEMs that are developing hydrogen product with and testing here, it's a long-term strategy, and it's supported by the existing business streams that they already have, which are able to fund it. I've had in the past 2 years two major startups come through our books, and they've eventually run out of money before they've actually got to the commercialization stage. And I think one of the things I hear around sort of government circles at the moment is there is funding to help people develop products and develop systems and sort of solutions and disruptive solutions, particularly for our sector. But that access to finance for that commercialization stage is few and far between at the moment, and it's a real challenge.
Great, thanks, Simon. I think that leads perfectly on to opening up the barrier discussion with the wider membership. I don't know whether, Zoe, you want to give a short overview of this slide before Dan comes in first.
Yeah, happy to. So it's very simple. Basically, we're really tasked to look at kind of regulation and procurement. We're also interested in things like access to finance, and also how kind of government policy and the certainty interacts with things like access to finance. So basically, really keen to hear your experiences or the things that you've seen in the sector about where there are barriers and what you think the kind of the enabling conditions might be. Like if we're going to talk about kind of what your perfect world would be in the last session, but if there are things that you think are really important, please do highlight them now as enabling conditions as well.
Okay, great. I think, Dan, if you could come in first, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, it's a long list of barriers, I guess. So probably a discussion we can have later, if that's okay. I mean, I definitely echo Simon's views. I mean, we've seen companies, my customers have gone down. The energy, some of the engine, fuel cell manufacturers have gone down. Obviously, funding's been pulled from the US in the green sector, so it's very tough out there. I would say Innovate has been brilliant. All of the Innovate schemes we've been on are great. We're an SME, we get 70% funding, but I still got to find that 30%. And that's where for us anyway, I can only talk for us, that's where we kind of fall foul. And typically you'd say, well, go and get investment. We've gone through the Innovate investment pitch sessions. Brilliant. Did the pitch, got people coming to me wanting to invest immediately after. Then I have to say the support stopped. Where do I go from there? I'm an SME, so I've got a small team. I'm running a busy technology company that's trying to develop the technology to get out and meet investors. UK investors, I'm afraid to say, are very risk averse, tend to be run by accountants and lawyers. In the US, you get much more entrepreneurial. So we need to bridge that gap, and whether the government can play in a role in helping to bridge that gap to de-risk for that entrepreneurial type of investment. Because at the moment, I mean, I'm starting to work with brokers in the US, and you can see what's going to happen here. The technology get picked up elsewhere, out of the UK, and maybe those jobs will go with it if I'm lucky. But actually, you know, I'm a Brit. I want to do this here. I want to do this. I can see the value. I can see where we add. And then there are other barriers. There are regulatory barriers. We're dealing with ammonia. It has some talent challenges. We need to educate the government departments. We need to understand what's required from us as an industry to be able to supply to you what you need to make decisions around this. And I would say there's barriers on the grid balancing on the energy market. So trying to get a grid connection nowadays, almost impossible. Even if you had a technology which we should have very soon that could decarbonise that last little piece, we won't get a grid connection is pretty much what I'm being told across the board. So how do we enter into pilot schemes that help us de-risk that across those areas, basically? So, whether it's pilots, whether it's sand pits, so that we can and demonstrate that technology in a safe environment. I know there are new ideas out there, I think, that we could use that could help solve some of those problems. I'll go quiet again.
Great. I think, Neil, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, I can't really weigh in on the first one quite as much as what we've seen, because as the training side, we're definitely looking more into the barriers. So in having a look, just within generating courses and things that we've actually done as training previously, some of these key barriers, although we're not like one of the main SMEs or producers or one of the disruptors as such, we work very closely with all of you guys and all the other sort of people that are getting into that space. So being able to see, just for like regulation, for example, to work down the list, we're having to either constantly change or constantly react to something that isn't necessarily there and isn't clear to begin with. So I imagine, say, the majority of the people that are in the actual breakout room probably see that as well, where you're having to sort of ad hoc and stick together quite a lot of different areas that's causing that major hurdle. So where we're going out to try and help educate, train, like raise that awareness, a lot of our content is, well, we're sort of using this, we're sort of applying this. There's no definitive, and it's a bit of a tricky one as it goes through there as well. But when it comes to sort of the support and the government side and investment to be able to look at, is where we keep having to sort of change the barriers for the funding availability, like was just mentioned. We're mentioning about all the ideas that are coming out and the plans and the new hydrogen strategy that's been put in, which is great. But also a lot of the times it's sort of like preemptive targets that sound really good if they get met. But a lot of the times when we end up saying things, well, we're going into places and trying to help the workforce move over to this setup. But people are going, well, when am I going to use it? When can I imply this? How is it going to affect me? So a lot of the times it's sort of adding in that funding gap, the support to be able to upskill the workforce to where people can increase their team size from a very small team running around and being really busy to actually being able to gain that excess and take that next step so that they know that there's the availability there to be able to add it on, which is always a problem and it's always something that's there. But we're hoping that, again, we've worked with other companies and hopefully we can work with everyone in here. So feel free to reach out and add on if you want some sort of hydrogen safety training. But that will be that big driver and big push, but without any sort of backing and guidance and sensible plan to go, actually, we now have people that can support all of you guys to be able to scale up and go. We're sort of in that closed loop of, you've got your small teams now, but nowhere to be able to go to in future. And that future plan needs to be fixed and done and have that clear guidance.
Great, thanks, Neil. That's really useful. Chloe, do you want to come in next?
Yeah, I think to start with, echoing that point about the clear guidance, I think we talked about finance for some of the people who can't necessarily afford it needing access to finance, but then some of those who can afford it don't want to put their money in. Some of our customers perhaps don't want to do it until they know that they absolutely have to and they've got the certainty on the regulation. So it's not going to change and the timeline will change from 2035 to 2040 or whatever. They need to know exactly what they need to hit by when, and then they'll be able to do it. And then two specific barriers that I've seen in our company, things like the low carbon hydrogen standard. On one hand, it is great because it is prescriptive and it gives that level of you've got to meet this in order to qualify, so you know what you need to do. But on the other hand, it's a little bit too prescriptive and that it's only got a list of very specific eligible production pathways, ammonia dissociation not being one of them, hence I'm obviously biased. But if we're going to start having lots of these disruptive technologies wanting to come forward and add themselves to the low carbon hydrogen standard, I don't know what Lee will mention about the aluminium one, I assume it's not already in there, for example. If each one of these innovative technologies has to take a year, 2 years to battle through getting their project added to this document, that's time taken away from being able to do it. And it also detracts from the company's ability to bring that innovative technology and disruptive technology in. So if we can make it a little bit more broad, if you meet these criteria, we can look at how it can be added and go from there. So that's one thing on the low carbon hydrogen standard. And then the other one being things like, similarly to regulation, for example, coming back to the liquid hydrogen piece is a specific. The HSE needs to be on board, for example, with its up-to-date models of how that behaves. Regulation, I think Dan mentioned it, in terms of people need to know and be educated on, say, gaseous hydrogen, liquid hydrogen, ammonia, all of these things, so that when we come with these technologies, we don't hit barriers of, oh, we can't do that because we can't model it, or we don't have a permit in place for this because we don't know, or whatever it is. It'll all take time, but it kind of adds barriers to being able to deploy things quickly. That's all.
Great, thanks, Chloe. Simon, you want to come in?
Sorry, I was on mute. It was just following up really. So the 2.5 billion in the industrial strategy is very welcome in terms of government support for innovation. Probably coming from the industry side, it probably needs to be about 5 times that, but we've got to be realistic as to where that is. The infrastructure piece, I think, at the moment on the vehicle side is the biggest challenge. We've seen a lot of startups come through who are talking to end users, but end users are incredibly nervous about the fact of investing into product when there isn't necessarily an infrastructure to support it. Going historically, we saw this a great deal with electrification. And electrification for us was a relatively slow start. And you look at the marketplace for electrification now, it's a thing. It's real. You go and buy a product and you can charge anywhere. I'm hoping that within the hydrogen economy moving forward, the government can help with infrastructure to accelerate getting the products into market that will allow the end user to actually start using them more quickly than they have with the electrification piece.
Simon, can I just clarify on that? So is that government help by setting clear guidelines, standards, regulations, or is it by investing in it?
It's an investment piece, really.
Okay, thank you. That's really useful to know.
It kind of just needs to energise the market a little bit. They particularly on the heavy commercial vehicle side, the market, it's desirable. It's something they want. But there's also that nervous piece that the product will cost a lot more money, and the refueling piece for them is a real challenge.
Great, I think Kim, if you'd like to come in.
Yeah, I just want to go down the list that's here quickly and give my perspective on the question. In terms of regulation, in terms of the UK business environment, I think there's a difference here between regulation and policy, and actually we need both. There's a different answer. So I think if you look at the hydrogen economy and where it's going into, so let's go e-fuels, SAF, right? For example, so you're looking at fuels, you're looking at land, sea and air fuels, you're looking at industrial decarbonisation, you're looking at power, really, is the major areas that it's looking at going into. Is the regulations or is the policy even fully linked up across those right now? No. So if I take SAF for the example, e-fuels, the DFT SAF mandates and what you need to get the credit for using a SAF requires additionality. That means the HEA hydrogen mandates don't add up. It doesn't add up. So there's stacking of CFDs, which is different, but the policies, the timelines of the policies for production and demand side don't time in together across DFT if you're talking land, sea and air decarbonisation domestically, and the feedstocks that would produce into the fuels longer term. So I think there's something there in policy. Regulation, I think, is more specifically about mostly safety, I think, as others mentioned here, whether it's ammonia or a derivative or whether it's hydrogen itself. It's mostly about how regulations and handling and management, as you scale up, enable an environment to be able to sandbox safe play in as you scale up technologies and commercialise them. I think that's where the regulation bit comes in. Public procurement, I think, is an interesting one, because I think we tried this at the start of the hydrogen economy. It didn't quite work, and I think it's back to what one of the colleagues mentioned earlier around OEMs. Should we be looking at how we use public procurement to decarbonise stuff like refuse vehicles, buses, where they're state funded, etc., transportation, ferries, for example, where we own infrastructure, own the floating stock, like the rolling stock and other things? It's a very good idea. Where we've fallen down is then the OEMs not being ready for it in the past, I think. But I do think it is somewhere where the innovation value chain we have in the UK could really do with the UK making procurement decisions in and around the hydrogen value chains to be able to move that forward. And for me, things like we're an island nation, we're actually an archipelago. We've got a lot of islands, and even with the IMO rolling back or doing a I'm not going to move while Trump's in power, basically move a couple of weeks ago for maritime decarb, I still think the UK should still be moving in it, because I think it'll still come. And I think it's actually a security, an energy security issue for us, because people who do remember the last World War will remember you can blockade an island quite easily, especially when you do nothing but import stuff all the time. So I do think there is a role for public procurement there that we need to go back to. That just because we tried it and the OEMs weren't ready doesn't mean it's not the right tool in the stage of the hydrogen economy to use it, because it is market failure right now. The market's not there working naturally, so it is the right place for public support. Access to finance, I think others will talk about. We all know it's hard. Investment in infrastructure, shared infrastructure. It's whether it's the CO2 development piece, whether it's CCUS, whether it's hydrogen, all of these innovative value chains, the need for shared infrastructure and dependency on it is key. So I know the government's trying to do that, look at that with things like Project Union and NISO and all the rest of it, but it's not quite clicking yet. But again, it is an area where investment in the right infrastructure, investment in leveraging the right areas of our public procurement to unlock the specific areas we know hydrogen is ultimately going to be needed for, I think is key to how we get GDP growth out of it, basically.
Can I just ask a question, and it's kind of for the group? So say we got public procurement, a big push to changing all the bin lorries to hydrogen across the entire country. Do we currently have the capacity, particularly in the smaller end of the sector, to actually service that? Or do we have any large companies who could help, who would then also bring smaller companies in their supply chain?
So this is what I mean about where we always jump to, right, well, can we do it for the whole country or not, right, straight away. I think we've got to look at those steps and what is the right innovation ecosystem steps in that, and what is the right regions to be able to do it in and build it up that way. I think a big bit of where the hydrogen economy is stuck right now is nobody wants to be the first movers, but once you see first movers moving, it will start to move really quickly, and it's that chicken and egg. You won't get that ecosystem is everyone ready to jump until you do it in a region area first and then build it out from there and there, because it won't be there without that demand signal. So that's what I mean about the innovation ecosystem. That's what's got to be designed better, is that step up.
So you need the kind of, we call it market shaping, the whole kind of like slow development of an industry with really targeted support to get it up that staircase. Yeah, okay, all right, that's really useful to know, thank you.
Lee?
Okay, yes, initially I'll do the negative first. So really to echo Chloe's point, really, with the LCHS rules, for us, we don't fall into any of those categories either. And it's going to take us a long time to get our what is really low or very green hydrogen into that standard. And that's the difference between £10 a kilo, give or take now, for us, which is obviously a big chunk of money for a small company. And yet, our feedstock is classed by DESN as being zero carbon footprint because it's post-consumer, and therefore, it will be shipped abroad. So, and if you consider there's sort of 500,000 tons of waste aluminium getting shipped abroad each year, that's all potential feedstock for us, and we could be losing £10 a kilogram on that. And obviously that's quite a big chunk of money for us. I think it's something like 56,000 tons. If we processed all of that of hydrogen, we could be producing a year. That's the negative for us, and obviously that's just something we've got to live with at the moment. But yeah, any help on that? Great. On the positive, access to finance. We've worked really well with Innovate UK. We got a smart grant, which I'm sure anyone who's got a business here knows how difficult they are to get. And we've had really good support from those guys since. And I can't do anything but sing their praises. We've been really had a really positive relationship and a positive experience. We're quite lucky as for an SME. A few of us are from a financial background, and investment is something that isn't the hardest thing in the world. Dan, I feel your pain, but yeah, I've been on the other side of the fence, and if you're the inventors and stuff, that's not your wheelhouse. We're lucky enough; a few of us have been in finance before, so access to that money hasn't been as difficult. But saying that again, we've had really good help from Innovate UK, and there's lots of grants out there, and now we've realised that they're, spending time on that and accessing those grants is a very useful thing to do. But once again, there is also a lot of hoops to jump through for small SMEs, and there are companies out there, venture sustainable ventures, etc., who work on no win, no fee, etc. But it does take up a lot of time, and we've almost got someone working full time just on grants. So maybe that could be looked at. The process could become a little bit easier once you've gone through that process once to sort of get additional funding. That would be helpful as well. But also from the Innovate UK stuff and Set Squared we work with as well very closely. We've had access to universities and high-level people at universities that are helping us refine our technology, etc. So I can't do anything but sing the praises on that. And I thought I'd just come up with a few positives because there's been a few negatives there in that chat.
Great, thanks, Lee. We are running 5 minutes over time for this session, so do we want to move on to the final session, because I think there's quite a lot of overlap. So I think Chloe is just waiting on this point, but I think if you want to come in, and then we'll go to the final question.
Yeah, I was just going to come in to answer Zoe's question earlier about if you were to suddenly say, let's do all of the refuse trucks in the UK, could it be possible? I think obviously we'd need to model exactly how many there are in the UK, because I don't know that off the top of my head. But that would be something that would be perfect for the HEA to kind of work together on that, because Air Products have got a new 35 ton a day liquefier coming on stream next year. So that's a significant increase in, say, liquid capacity that can come and support the UK market, and say back up. Say if Geopura have a certain amount that they can support in a certain region, we could do a different region or back that one up, or whatever it is. It'd be a case of amalgamating that demand with amalgamating the supply with the actual demand, and then maybe prioritizing based on region, based on routes that are super hilly and couldn't be electrified or something like that, and then matching it up and working it out together.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I think just to elaborate, so one of the things that we are looking at is we've heard from a couple of other areas, different subsectors of clean energy, that at the moment, what quite often happens with procurement is that you get very price-focused specifications. You get a large company taking that on, like a tier one. But because we've set it so closely on price, it then kind of chills the possibility for innovation in the rest of the supply chain, and doesn't necessarily give any incentives for your top-tier company to then bring in disruptive companies. So we're trying to work out, okay, so if we were going to scale on any of these areas, how do we do it in a pro-small business, pro-disruptor way that's still manageable and that still works in terms of building capacity in the industry, which I would welcome thoughts on, but I think we do probably also need to move on. So hopefully you can see the last slide. So basically this is your kind of, if you had a magic wand, what would you think we should prioritize? If you had your top 1, 2, 3 items, or one particular thing that you would really like to see the government do that you think could unblock a lot of opportunity for disruptive businesses and for growth, what would it be? And I know we're running quite tight, so if you also want to put some of your answers in the chat, feel free to do that. Or again, we are very happy to pick up offline with all of these things as well.
Just giving everyone a moment to think about this question. I think Dan is first out the block, so Dan.
Always an opportunity to jump in there, so I'll take it. Yeah, I mean, for us, it is finance. I'll take on your well other beer, Lee, and you can give me a bit of advice here. But yeah, it's bridging that gap. It's being able to find that extra 30%. It's being able to grow the business and not give most of it away to ruthless investors, for example, or just be some assistance in that process. And it doesn't have to be investment. It can be loans. It can be convertible notes. It could be more innovative ways. For us, that is definitely a blocker because we are an SME, so we will take risk. I would question the big guys, the OEMs, and I won't name names, but some people have pulled out of hydrogen projects that are big names. My feeling is guys that are making things like oil or doing are not really going to be supported for some of these policies. They've got reasons why they're not going to, and some of my engine customers are saying we're not seeing market pull, so we need to look at that. But for us, it would be how do we get over that risk? How do we grow that business through finance and assistance, knowledge, know-how, all those things that could help us do it would be greatly appreciated.
Perfect, thanks Dan. Simon?
Yeah, sorry, it's just an observation. Obviously, having a French parent company, we have a lot of access to European Union, and in good ideas and approaches, there's a European edict now that within certain areas, you've got to have a multi-refueling system put in place within certain geographic areas. And I think to actually look at that and follow that approach inside the UK, and I'm talking particularly here from a vehicle perspective, because that's our bread and butter. The desire for operators, because obviously as a business we sit between the developer and the operator. To actually have that infrastructure in place, or the proposal to do that would be a really useful thing, and I think it would lubricate the market a little bit to actually start to increase the desire. Because at the end of the day, we all want to commercialise this. You don't want to rely on subsidies forever. You want to turn this into a commercial operation, but that injection of both desire and, as other people have said, a little bit more funding to actually make that happen and drive it forward would be really, really useful.
Great, thank you, Simon. Just raise my own hand. Claire, Charlie.
Yeah, me. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I said Claire and then I'm Charlie. It's Charlie.
Yes, okay. So I think from GeoPura's point of view, very, very simply, what we're trying to do is displace diesel, right? In generators. So if we had a magic wand, what would we want to see? A ban on diesel generators or new diesel generators would be a really simple one, but that's obviously not necessarily the easiest thing to do. But if there could be legislation to make the use of diesel less attractive, because ultimately what we're finding is end users are not seeing the pull or not feeling the pull to move away from diesel as fast as we think they ought to be. We see some movers in there, like Balfour Beatty, for example, are very keen to move away from diesel, not so much for carbon reduction, but actually for air quality issues. If we could see more legislation following the news we see about the dangers of using diesel as a fuel with regards to air quality, there's been linked to dementia in the news recently. If we could see that more driven by policy to reduce diesel use, I think that'd be really helpful. But on the flip side, maybe having subsidy, not forever, like I agree you said there, Simon, but initial subsidy to help I guess not just the fuel to get parity with diesel. I think we're getting quite close to that with hydrogen allocation round, RTFO, things like that. Like that can help get us close to diesel parity on the fuel, but then on the actual hardware itself, if there could be some sort of support for end users to pay that little bit extra that they would need to get a diesel generator to get one of GeoPura's hydrogen power units, for example, for a short term, that could help unlock the demand. And I think that's what we need. Obviously, everyone needs to move together. We can have people producing hydrogen and developing their technologies, but we also need to stimulate the demand as well.
Great, thanks, Charlie. I think that's very much a recommendation that's echoed across different hydrogen use applications. So looking in the mobility sector, kind of giving end users temporary support to be able to supply buy hydrogen powered equipment, whether irrespective of the use area. So I think that's very much a recommendation that is that the HEA champions. Lee, do you want to come in? Yeah.
Sorry, do you mind if I just ask a question on that? Because one of the things that we're interested in is like, can disruption help? So are there things that wouldn't require government involvement? So innovative financing, where maybe government could help to de-risk that financing, which would then allow end users to get better financing for, you know, leasing or buying in, this sort of thing. So not necessarily government subsidy, but where we could help disruptive business models. Do you think that sort of thing's possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you say, innovative financing for end users is a really interesting point, and versus subsidy. I mean, something that we see with our generators, that they're fuel cell generators, they're very efficient in comparison to a diesel generator, reciprocating engine. So actually, what we're trying to get customers to see is that the capex or the lease cost of the hardware is more expensive, but ultimately with use, we believe that the fuel cost will be less, and it's getting customers to take the confidence to do that trial, to make that initial investment, and then to see what we'd hope for them to see is that actually long term there wouldn't really be a difference in price with using a diesel generator. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Great, thanks for coming in on that point, Charlie. Lee, I think you've got one final point, and then maybe we'll just take a moment to look at the comments in the chat.
Everyone's made some really good points there. So just to touch on some other sort of smaller pieces, if you like. On the first point, I think these sort of things are really good. You know, listening and making sure that companies like ours, like Dan's, that come up on the radar a lot quicker with the government. And therefore, you know, the barriers that would potentially be there can start to be looked at early, rather than when we're at the point where we're trying to scale, and then these barriers are 10 times taller than they would be. You know, we kind of understand them early doors, but there's nothing we can do about them. And until we're a certain size, it seems that no one listens. So having the ear early, I think, is good. I mean, you know, a lot of that's down to the SMEs as well, making sure we join organisations like the HEA as well, that, you know, that there is a responsibility there. But these sort of talks, I think they're invaluable, and I think today's been very constructive. If I could resolve one barrier, yeah, I'm going to say it again, LCHS rules, because it's costing my company over £10 a kilo. So, yeah, so that's always going to be a big problem for us. And I think in regards to approaches from other countries, I've been dealing with the guys the investment guys in Leipzig, and their matchmaking over there in regards to wanting us to be over there, like asking us what do we need, what are we looking for. They've done everything from, you know, provide translators to local investment teams, looking at, you know, helping us identify our offtakes, helping us identify our feedstocks. They've really gone the extra mile, and I'm not going to name names here, but, you know, I've dealt with some of the free ports and the hubs and the other sort of so-called environments that are set up for business, and it hasn't been anywhere near as helpful. And in fact, it's been lacking in certain cases, I've got to be honest. And we've had to do a hell of a lot more of the work. Okay, we're going to get some tax breaks if we locate in those places, but also, you know, we have to scale to work in those places, and it hasn't been made easy. So I think, you know, learning from that sort of approach from what they're doing in Leipzig, and I'm sure it's the same in other countries. I'm sure other countries are worse, but obviously we're looking for good examples. And for me, working with Leipzig, that was outstanding, the way they approach this, and their matchmaking. Yeah, they're sort of a Tinder in disguise, shall we say.
Great, thanks, Lee. There is a very active chat now that's kind of summarising some of the other HEA members as kind of key asks, and Chloe very much echoes what Lee just said in terms of unlocking the low carbon hydrogen standard for all production pathways. I'm just going to pick out a few, but Kim just wrote in that her biggest wish is that we reform the UK power market to structurally make our power cheaper and remove such a strong linkage to natural gas. If our power was cheaper enough, we could be exporting from the UK. Others, going back to Kim's earlier points around not focusing all the support on the bigger companies and the innovation, recognising the role that SMEs and and contributes and the contribution to to our GDP. So focusing on smaller distributed end markets and higher value products. But I don't know whether anybody else wants to come in on a couple of their points, but I will share all these comments in the chat in a written follow-up to DBT. And I think, as DBT have expressed on this call today, very much happy to receive further details to support their thinking. I know a couple of HEA members that weren't able to join today have written in really detailed feedback. So I think you're all very welcome to do that. So I am just going to write into the other breakout room just to give them a warning that I'm going to kind of bring us all back together. But if there's any final comments that anybody would like to make, kind of this is the moment. With just a couple of minutes left in our breakout session before we go back to the wider group for a feedback moment. And just jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to say one thing. I think, we've seen a certain number of companies pull out of hydrogen recently, or certainly pause their activities. And I think it's about off-taking, it's about end users. So I just want to raise that. I know this isn't all about end use, about production and transport and storage and all the other things, but it does seem to be an issue in that space. And I'm not sure what that's been raised clearly here.
Can I come in on that and see what I think what I actually think we've seen, right? With the majors pulling back, and actually I think the opportunity space is. The reason I think you're seeing a lot of the big balance sheets pull back, and the government did through Harwan and others basically bet on some big balance sheets, RWEs, Iberdrolas, Unipers, Statkrafts, European utility big balance sheets. What they've all done is what you've seen oil and gas do 18 months, 2 years previously, and go, what's the other thing I can spend my money on that gets me a better return? And they've all gone, I need to spend on the utility bit, I need to spend on the grid, I need to spend every spare penny of cash flow I've got, strengthening the spine of the beast before I add on demand or supply. So I think the European majors rolling back means we've lost a second set of big balance sheets in the energy transition. We lost the oil and gas ones first, and now we've lost the European utilities, unfortunately. I do understand why, though. If you've got that choice of where you put your return on capital employed, that's what you'll do. But that means the pure players that don't have somewhere else, don't have fossil molecules or big infrastructure that they want to go and milk, that's where the playing fields now. It's got to be them. It's got to be them that we bet on. It's got to be you guys that we bet on that are going to push this forward. And that's why we're finding that funding gap at the moment. It's given the funders the collywobbles that they think it's demand. I think there's demand still there. You've got to find the right niches and build them up. So I think the market will come back from that, but I think it's given us a false impression there's less demand there than there actually is, because they're not being honest about why they pulled back.
Great. Thanks for that, Kim. I have just said to the other group that we'll be coming back at 12:17, so I'm just going to pop us all back into to connect with the wider roundtable, and then we'll look to Zoe to lead on the feedback session. Thanks everybody for your contributions. It's been a great breakout session.
Yeah, that was really interesting, guys. Thank you. Really enjoyed that.